Inflation is eating your paycheck up. It costs a lot to gas up your car. I walked out of the grocery store with 5 bags of groceries that I could hold in one hand. It was $127. That's what people are focused on. I mean, I know that. They know that. If you're going to come up with big, lofty ideals about changing the world and saving the polar bears, people don't care. They don't care. They want to know, if this project is in my community, what's it going to do for my community? I'm not saying they don't care about the rest of the country, or they don't care about carbon, or they don't care about polar bears or anything else. But that's the immediate question they have. What's it going to do for me? And we answer that question.
A lot of folks want to say that energy is in this dichotomy, in us versus them, a fossil or oil and gas world versus a renewables world. And as I've said before, there is no versus, there is only us. We have to figure out this energy transition together. One of the things that I'm delighted to know is that there are politicians who also agree with that. And I've had the pleasure of meeting one of North Carolina's staunchest, not just advocates for clean energy, but converts to clean energy. I'm the host, Nico Johnson, and today I get the joy and pleasure of sitting down with John Szoka. John was a North Carolina state representative for 10 years, 5 terms. And today we're going to talk about his conversion story and how it lives on as a legacy in the work that he continues to do. John, it's so great to have you on Suncast.
Well, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
So you were telling me a fun story about your when you first came into the legislature here in North Carolina. You, as many Republicans, were essentially against renewables, thought that it was a sham. I'd love to hear how you came to a different realization.
That is an interesting story. When I was first elected, well, my history was a retired military officer. I owned several small businesses, so I wasn't really in the energy sector. So when I came to the legislature, I was concerned about tax reform, things like that. Lobbyists came to my office, a conservative lobbyist, and said, "What do you think about solar energy?" I said, "The only thing I know about solar energy is it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for government tax subsidies. Otherwise, it's a bunch of junk. It's not going to work."
Right.
And she said, "Well, the organization I represent has a little bit different viewpoint." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And she proceeded to tell me what it was. And I was polite and I listened. And there was something that she was saying kind of made sense.
Yeah.
So what I knew about her was she worked for an association. I also knew that she was a conservative. So I assumed she wasn't trying to hoodwink me in anything. Right. So I listened, gave me a piece of paper, read it. She said, "If you have any questions, call me." So I thought about it that night. And I called her the next day, asked for some more information. Went on my own little personal journey of discovery of energy for about 5 or 6 months. And I changed my mind because what she was telling me was, I mean, if this is absolute truth up and down, everybody shades things a little bit. And what other folks were telling me in other sectors of the energy sector they weren't even close.
Right.
So it was a trusted conservative giving me a message about clean energy, which I then pursued. So I went from skeptic to champion in about 6 or 8 months.
Wow. And you did a lot of research, you said, on your own.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious where you sought information. Where did you end up finding the kinds of information that gave you a foundational understanding of clean energy such that you were converted?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I thought to myself, where am I going to look for this? I did a Google search and found all kinds of information. I almost said trash, but information on the internet.
Yeah.
And then I ended up on some of the federal websites.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying the federal government does everything right, but generally speaking, I liked the way they presented the information because it was factual.
Yeah.
I could read it. It had footnotes. I looked at the footnotes, went to primary sources. I mean,
Is this through the Department of Energy?
Mostly through the Department of Energy. Yeah. I'm a numbers guy.
And an Army guy.
And an Army guy. Give me facts. Don't give me your feelings.
Yeah.
I'll have my own feelings. I want the facts. So I found the facts, and the deeper and deeper I dug into it is like, wow. Yeah, but one of the things, one of my incoming suppositions, solar wouldn't exist without massive subsidies. So I thought, well, what else has been subsidized in the energy field?
Right.
And what I found was, as I'm sure many people listening to this video know, is that there's lots of subsidies. The difference between what was 10 years ago, subsidies were out in the open,
Right.
vice things that have been there for decades and are buried in the tax
They're
code.
included, right?
And when you start looking in the tax code and start doing numbers, you'll see massive amounts of subsidies for oil and gas and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I am not saying that's a bad thing.
Right.
But if you're going to compare one thing to another, you know, let's compare the same thing. It's like when I watch Sesame Street with my kids, one of these things is not like another. You know, kitty, puppy, a baby goat, and an apple. One of these things, let's compare likes to like, not skew information so it makes one side look better than the other.
Indeed. I mentioned that you did serve for 10 years in the legislature. First of all, thank you for the staunch advocacy for clean energy that you gave the state of North Carolina, and in so doing the Southeast in general during that tenure. Having liberated yourself from the from the chains of legislature and what you can do and say to focus your energy and attention, you have now in the private sector focused on helping the conservative rural communities learn to embrace the knowledge that over a decade you cultivated. And you are now the president of a company or an organization called the Conservative Energy Network.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a bit more about the premise of the CEN and where at a high level you engage at a state level with policymakers now that you're on the other side of the aisle?
Okay. Well, first, the 10 years, I believe in true citizen legislatures. And I think that career politicians on either side, they need to go home and get in touch with what's really happening.
Right.
So about 2016, somebody who was thinking just like me in the state of Michigan came to the conclusion that clean energy was a conservative issue and it was a good thing. They started the Conservative Energy Network back then in the state of Michigan, and it grew to 6 to 8. And then when I was selected as the CEO last year, we're at 24 states that we operate in.
Wow.
We operate basically at 2 levels. We talk to our federal components, you know, senators, but we don't do a lot of that. Our main focus is at the state level, where we go in and we're a 501c3, so it's about education. We try and educate legislators in all the states we work in to give them a similar experience to mine.
I was going to say full circle. Like now you're coming in as the evangelist.
I don't know if evangelist is right, but...
well, I think, in fact, I mean, think about it. Evangelists, in many ways, show up with a pamphlet that presents the facts about their ideology and hope that it's in some way swayed them to consider alternative means of thinking.
I guess, but I don't stand on the side of the road or in the airport handing out things.
No, you don't. That's good.
We're knocking on doors. But, so we educate legislators on things. We don't lobby for any bill, but every bill that's out there has underlying principles that people need to know about. Because quite frankly, being a legislator is very difficult. You get elected, you can't know everything about everything. So you have to rely on somebody. And like me, I relied on a trusted conservative. That's what we want legislators to do with us. And it doesn't mean we don't talk to people who self-identify as liberal. We certainly do. But that's our main focus. And then the next focus is down at the county and local level.
Tell me about the Land and Liberty Coalition.
It is the Land and Liberty Coalition is a project of Conservative Energy Network. And most renewable projects, both solar and wind, onshore wind, are in rural areas, which irrespective of their party registration, those people are conservative. Farmers, ranchers, small towns of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people. So I don't care how they registered the vote. They have conservative values. And all of a sudden, somebody's coming in with one of these things that they don't understand. And they don't understand it not because they're not smart. They're very smart people in rural areas. But it's something new that's there.
They lack information.
Lack information. So again, as the trusted agent, we go into areas where there's going to be solar and onshore wind, and we educate county commissioners, we educate municipal leaders, we educate chambers of commerce, people who show up at an open meeting about what does solar and onshore wind do. Everybody pretty much knows how it works, but What's the benefit if this project goes here? What's the benefit that accrues to you
Right.
as a member of this community? That's what's left out a lot of times.
Yeah.
And we just talk like we're talking now.
Yeah.
Although when I show up at something like that, I don't wear a
Never
suit and a
in your
tie.
suit.
I'm
Yeah.
more like this or with a vest or whatever, like I'm going hunting.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it last night that all too often folks will try to do this kind of advocacy, and they show up as liberals with their liberal ideologies and even their liberal dress, if you will, their garment. But why is it that they're I mean, apart from the obvious that you've discussed, why have you found that CEN coming into these town hall meetings or environments is so compelling, or so much more compelling?
As I always say, I have to live in the real world.
Yeah.
And what's going on in the real world today? Inflation is eating your paycheck up.
Yeah.
It costs a lot to gas up your car. I walked out of the grocery store with 5 bags of groceries, so I could hold in one hand. It was $127.
Right.
That's what people are focused on.
Right.
I mean, I know that. They know that.
Yeah.
If you're going to come up with big, lofty ideals about changing the world and saving the polar bears, but people don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care. They want to know, if this project is in my community, what's it going to do for my community? I'm not saying they don't care about the rest of the country, or they don't care about carbon, or they don't care about polar bears or anything else. But that's the immediate question they have.
Yeah.
What's it going to do for me? And we answer that question.
Right. And are you finding that developers in these rural communities, or developers that are working in these rural communities, are aware of organizations like CEN? How are you engaged in? How do you know that there's a need for a town hall meeting where CEN can make a difference?
Well, first of all, a lot of developers understand exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And they do what I'm saying, but they go in with the name of their company on their shirt or behind them.
Sure.
Which sometimes works. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Hard to
particularly if
convince.
you have a hostile crowd,
Yeah.
because they assume you're only coming in here to do whatever you're going to do to make a lot of money.
Right. And you're going to say
there's no
whatever it
benefit.
takes. Yeah. And you're going to say whatever it takes to get us convinced.
So we could have the same message. I mean, a developer could have the message.
Yep.
We could have the message. But just like in my conversion, if you will, it's not the message, it's the messenger.
Very cool. And I guess the second question to that is, how do developers know that they can bring in a CEN, or like how are folks finding you?
We, in the states in which we operate, and we're in 25 states, we go to them. And the developer community, it's not like it's millions and millions of developers. It's a relatively small community. So they know of our successes in different places, and oftentimes they call us. I mean, right now in Land and Liberty, we have 30 gigawatts of solar and wind that we're working on.
Amazing.
And educating population in that. Now, 30 gigawatts, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. John, one of the things that I have told you I'm impressed with the conversations that we always have, they're around this seeming oxymoron of conservatives and clean energy. Because if you watch the media, you would assume from Fox and Breitbart that every conservative hates the idea of the energy transition or clean energy, and they call solar, they say that solar and wind, create cancer and kill whales. But you're clear evidence that that is not true across the conservative landscape. Tim Echols in Georgia is clear evidence that that is not true. What conversations are you having in private about the reality of conservatives and clean energy?
Well, what do conservatives in rural areas care about? What do I care about as a conservative when it comes to energy in the whole sector?
Yeah.
What I care about is cost for the ratepayers, which is everybody who pays an electric bill.
Yeah.
If you can keep the cost low, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. What else do I care about? I care about property rights. If a farmer or a rancher wants a clean energy facility on his property, why is it up to his neighbor to decide that if he can have it?
Right.
It's not.
Nope.
If he wanted a better view, or if he wanted a view of where they're putting in the facility, he can go buy the land.
Right.
But sometimes people get confused in rural America as to where their property rights end and where the next guy's property rights begin. So that's a big thing. We don't talk much about carbon reduction out in rural areas.
Yeah.
Because it's It's one of those thoughts that sometimes people have a hard time getting their head around.
Right.
It's a little easier to get your head around it now with the extreme weather events we've had.
Sure.
But still, combining those two isn't really a talking point. It's property rights and it's cost, the cost of energy. I mean, we need to get the cost of all forms of energy, whether it's to power your vehicle, to warm and cool your home, whatever. We need to keep it as low as we can.
Well, it's encouraging to me that there are organizations out there like Conservative Energy Network that are advocating in our rural communities for the truth about their property rights and our ability with clean energy to reduce the cost to serve our communities with electricity moving forward, the ability to amplify what our grid can afford to do now with a multiplicity of generation technologies. And it's champions like you, John Szoka, who are out there helping to carry that load. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Well, and thank you for that.
Yeah. And thank you for tuning in to another session of the Suncast Media Zone. We're live at the UNC Clean Tech Summit. Join us again for the next session.